There are things you build that become so much a part of the landscape that people stop seeing them as built. They become ambient. They become assumed. They become the way things are, which is a different thing entirely from the way things came to be, and the distance between those two versions of the same fact is where a certain kind of person lives for a very long time before they understand what that distance has cost them. I have been living in that distance for 7 years. Not unhappily, not entirely. I am not a person who experiences her life as a grievance, and I want you to know that before I tell you the rest. I am a civil engineer. I design things that have to hold. I understand professionally and in my bones that the most important structures are the ones nobody thinks about until they fail. I did not understand for a long time that I had built myself into one. My name is Simone Okafor. I am 33 years old. I am a civil engineer living in Atlanta, Georgia, and last August, at the Okafor family reunion I had organized for the 7th consecutive summer, my father stood at the pavilion at Cedarwood Lake Campground in front of 42 family members and read the names of the people who had made the reunion possible. He read every name on the list. He paused at mine half a second, the kind most people would not register, and moved on. I was standing close enough to see my name on the paper in his hand. This is what came before that moment, and what I have been carrying since. Before I tell you the rest, I want to ask you something. What season is it where you are right now? Is it the kind of weather that makes you want to be outside, surrounded by people, or the kind that makes you want to be alone with something quiet? I ask because I've been thinking about what it means to belong to a place, not just to be present in it, but to be the reason it exists at all, to be so thoroughly the foundation of something that your presence inside it becomes invisible. August in northern Georgia is hot in a specific way that feels personal, the kind of heat that settles into your shoulders and stays. I had driven that route 7 times. I knew every exit. I knew the particular bend in the highway where the tree line opened up and you could see the ridge in the distance, and I knew that when I saw that ridge I was 40 minutes out, and I would start going through the checklist in my head, the pavilion permit, the name tags in the blue folder in my back seat, the medical forms binder, the slideshow drive in the outer pocket of my bag. I did not need the checklist. I had done this 7 times. I did it anyway because I am the kind of person who does not leave things to chance. And because the reunion worked because I did not leave things to chance, and because for 7 years I had told myself that the working of it was sufficient reason to keep building it. My father, Emeka Okafor, is 61 years old. He came to the United States from Lagos in 1986 with an engineering degree from the University of Lagos and a precision about certain things, punctuality, presentation, the correct way to address elders, that has never softened in the 37 years since. He built a structural engineering firm in Atlanta over 20 years that now employs 19 people and has completed work on 4 highway interchanges and 2 hospital expansions in the greater metro area. He is a man of genuine accomplishment, and he knows it, not arrogantly, but in the settled way of someone who has worked hard enough for long enough that the knowledge of his own competence has become simply factual, like knowing the load-bearing capacity of a beam. He is generous with praise for the people he sees clearly. He is a wonderful grandfather. He makes a pepper soup that takes 2 days and that people request by name at every family gathering. He loves his children in the way some fathers love, abundantly but not always specifically, not always with the attention to the individual that the individual needs. He is better at the category than the person. He has always been better at the category than the person. I am the second of 3 children. My brother Chukwemeka, Emeka Jr., called Junior by everyone, is 36. My sister Ngozi is 29. Junior is an attorney in Charlotte and has my father's specific quality of occupying space with authority, of moving through rooms as though the rooms were expecting him. Ngozi is a nurse practitioner in Decatur and has my mother's warmth, the particular openness that makes strangers tell her things on airplanes. I am the one in the middle, which is its own kind of education. Middle children learn early that the category of child is already full by the time they arrive. The first has the distinction of firstness, the last has the distinction of lastness, and the middle has the distinction of being the one who holds the shape of the family together without anyone assigning that role officially. I did not choose to be the one who organized things. I became it the way you become most things that define you, gradually, practically, because you were good at it, and because someone needed to do it, and because the doing of it felt for a long time like a form of belonging. The reunion was my grandmother's idea originally. My grandmother, Chidinma Okafor, Mama Chi, to everyone, started the gathering in 2003 when my grandfather retired, and she decided that the family had been scattered long enough across Atlanta and Charlotte and Houston and Lagos and London, and needed a fixed point to return to every year. For 11 years, she organized it herself, with the specific authority of a woman who has never in her life needed to ask twice for anything. When she died in 2014, the reunion nearly died with her. The following summer nobody organized it and nobody came, and the absence was felt as a specific kind of grief, the grief of a tradition interrupted, which is different from ordinary grief in that it is also a choice, and the choice feels like a second loss. I was 25 that summer. I was 2 years out of Georgia Tech with my civil engineering license and 18 months into my first job at a structural firm in Midtown, and I called my father in June and said, "I want to try to organize the reunion this year." He said, "Simone, that would mean everything to this family." I said, "Okay, I'll figure it out." I figured it out. I want to tell you what 7 summers of figuring it out actually looked like, because I think the phrase does not carry the specific weight of what it was. Every January, I contacted Cedarwood Lake Campground and confirmed the first weekend of August dates for the following summer, because I had learned in year 2 that waiting until spring meant losing the pavilion to corporate retreats and church groups who booked earlier and in larger numbers. I spoke, every year, with a campground coordinator named Terrence Busby, who by year 4 knew my voice before I gave my name and who held our preferred pavilion, Pavilion C, the one with the covered section and the outlet access and the view of the water, without a deposit until I called. As a professional courtesy, he extended because I had never once been late with a payment or unclear with a request. I built the attendee list every spring, which meant tracking down current addresses and phone numbers for 40-plus family members across 6 states and 2 countries, updating the list against the previous year, removing the names of people who had died, and adding the names of children who had been born. I designed and printed the name tags in the blue folder I kept specifically for this purpose. First name large, relationship to the family patriarch in smaller text below, because my grandmother had believed that people should know how they were connected, and I had believed she was right. I coordinated the meal sign-up through a shared document I rebuilt every year because family members lost the link and needed it resent, and one year my cousin deleted the entire second tab by accident, and I rebuilt it from memory in 40 minutes on a Thursday night after a 10-hour day on a bridge deck assessment. In 2019, my uncle Ifani collapsed at the pavilion on the second day of the reunion. He was 58 years old, and he had a history of hypertension that the family knew about in the vague, unexamined way families know about things that have not yet become emergencies. He was fine, a heat episode, dehydration, nothing that required hospitalization beyond the initial evaluation, but the 40 minutes between his collapse and the paramedics' clearance were the 40 minutes that changed how I organized everything afterward. That fall, I built the medical information form. I contacted every family member on the attendee list, 38 people that year, and asked them to complete a 1-page document listing their primary care physician, their current medications, their known allergies, their emergency contact outside the immediate family, and any conditions that first responders should know about. I gave them 6 weeks. I followed up twice. I received 31 completed forms and summarized the critical information into a single laminated reference card that I kept in the first aid kit I began bringing to every reunion. My father, when I showed him the system at the 2020 reunion, said, "Simone, this is exactly the kind of thing your grandmother would have done." He said it with genuine warmth. He meant it as the highest compliment he knew how to give. I thanked him and put the binder back in my bag and set up the name tag table. The slideshow was my own idea, begun in the winter of 2021. I had been looking through a box of photographs at my parents' house. Physical prints, the kind that exist in shoeboxes and envelopes in the back of closets, and I understood that these photographs were not going to survive another generation in that box. My grandfather had died in 2009. My grandmother in 2014. The people who knew the context of those photographs, who was standing next to whom, where the picture was taken, what year, what occasion, were getting older, and the window for capturing that context was not indefinite. I spent 3 months on the slideshow. I visited my parents' house 4 times to photograph the physical prints with my phone under the correct lighting. I contacted my aunt in London and my cousin in Lagos and requested the photographs they had, which arrived as compressed files via WhatsApp at irregular hours over 6 weeks. I sourced 94 photographs total. I identified the people in each one, where I could, by asking the elders while the elders were still available to ask. I sequenced the photographs chronologically. I wrote captions. I set it to a piece of music my grandmother had loved, an old highlife song my father identified for me in a voice message that I could hear had moved him, though he did not say so directly. I presented the slideshow at the 2022 reunion on a laptop connected to the campground's projector, and my Aunt Chioma cried, and my father watched the whole thing without speaking, and afterward he said, "This is a gift to the family." He said it looking at the screen, not at me. I want to tell you about the year the flight was cancelled. This was 2021, the year we came back after skipping 2020 for reasons I do not need to explain. I was flying from Atlanta to the regional airport 40 minutes from the campground, a route I had taken the previous 3 years, and my flight was cancelled at 6:14 in the morning due to a mechanical issue with the aircraft. The next available flight was the following day. The reunion started that afternoon. I had the name tag folder, the medical forms binder, the slideshow drive, the first aid kit, and the pavilion permit confirmation in my checked bag, which had already been loaded onto the aircraft. I retrieved my bag. I called the campground to confirm the pavilion was still set up. I got in my car in the long-term parking lot at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport at 7:02 in the morning, and I drove 14 hours to Cedarwood Lake Campground and arrived at 9:17 in the evening, 2 hours after the first day's bonfire had ended, and I set up the name tag table for the following morning in the dark with a flashlight app on my phone. My father did not know I had driven. I had not told anyone I had driven. I found out later that Junior had told the family my flight had been delayed and that I would arrive the following morning, which is what he assumed had happened and which was easier than the truth, and so the truth had simply not been shared. My closest friend and the person who has known me longest, a woman named Kezia Mensah, who I met in our first week at Georgia Tech and who is now a geotechnical engineer in Marietta, told me something the summer before the 2023 reunion that I have not stopped thinking about. We were running the trail behind Piedmont Park on a Saturday morning, and I was telling her about the slideshow updates I was making, new births, a death, a wedding, and she said, without breaking stride, "Simone, does your family know you drive 14 hours for this?" I said, "They know I come every year." She said, "That is not what I asked." I told her it hadn't come up. She said, "Make sure you know why it hasn't." I told her I knew why. She did not push. Kezia does not push. She deposits the true thing and lets it sit and trusts that you will come back to it when you are ready. She was right. I had not wanted to examine why, because examining why would have required acknowledging something I had been building around for 7 years, which was the possibility that the family I was organizing the reunion for had absorbed the reunion as ambient without ever fully locating its source. The 2023 reunion was the 7th. 42 attendees, the largest we had ever had. I had confirmed the pavilion in January with Terrence, who told me he had already blocked it for us without waiting for my call because he had simply assumed we would be back. I had rebuilt the attendee list in March. I had printed 61 name tags, more than attendees because people arrive late because tags get lost because I have learned to prepare for the variables. I had updated the medical forms and collected 37 of 42, my best return rate ever. I had added 11 new photographs to the slideshow, including the first photograph of my cousin's new daughter and a photograph of my grandfather as a young man in Lagos that my aunt had found in a box and sent me in April without explanation, just the image and a voice note that said only, "I thought you should have this." I drove from Atlanta on a Friday in late July and arrived at the campground at 3:47 in the afternoon and checked in with Terrence and set up the name tag table and tested the projector connection and confirmed the catering delivery for Saturday dinner and walked the pavilion once, slowly, to make sure everything was the way it needed to be before anyone arrived. The reunion ran for 2 days. It was good, the way it was always good, the particular good of 42 people who share blood and history and the specific language of a family, arriving at the same place and remembering what that feels like. My grandmother's pepper soup recipe, made by my Aunt Adore. The children who had never met becoming easy with each other by the second hour. The photographs on the screen. The older generation sitting under the covered section in the late afternoon when the heat became specific and watching everything with the particular satisfaction of people who have lived long enough to see what they built. My father was in good form. He moved through the gathering the way he moves through gatherings, expansive, warm, present in the general sense, the center of more than one conversation at a time. He found me once, on the first day, to tell me the slideshow looked wonderful. He found me once more on the second morning to ask if I had the pavilion permit in case the campground staff asked. I did. I always did. The reading of names was his idea, something he had introduced to reunions earlier, a formal moment at the close of the second day where he stood at the pavilion and acknowledged the people who had contributed to making the gathering happen. It was a good idea. I had thought so when he introduced it, and I still think so. Acknowledgement matters. The naming of effort matters. I had watched him do it twice before, and I had watched other names called, and I had waited, both times, to hear mine, and both times he had not said it, and both times I had told myself it was an oversight, the specific kind of oversight that accumulates so quietly you can dismiss each instance individually while the pattern builds underneath. The third time is when a pattern becomes undeniable. He stood at the pavilion at 4:11 in the afternoon on the second day. 42 people in various configurations of folding chairs and cooler lids and picnic blankets. The light at that hour comes through the trees at Cedarwood Lake at a particular angle that makes everything look like a photograph of itself. My father held the list. I recognized the paper, the specific layout, because I had seen him writing names on it the previous evening at the picnic table near the water. He began. He thanked my Aunt Adore for the food. He thanked my cousin Tabena for driving up from Houston with his 3 children. He thanked my Uncle Afani for being present and healthy, which got a laugh from everyone who remembered 2019. He thanked my cousin Blessing for the decorations she had contributed at the last minute. He moved down the list with the ease of a man comfortable with a microphone, which my father has always been. He reached the section of the list where my name should have been. I know this because I had watched the list in his hand and tracked where he was. I know this because the pause was real, half a second, the specific half second I have been describing, the kind most people in that pavilion would not have registered because they were not watching for it the way I was. He turned his head slightly, not toward me, toward the middle distance, in the way someone turns when a word is just out of reach or when a word has been reached, and then, for reasons that may never be fully examined, set back down. And then he continued. My cousin Namdi. My Aunt Chioma's contribution to the prayer. The campground staff, specifically Terrence, who he thanked by name with the full warmth of a man who is genuinely good at gratitude when it occurs to him. He raised his glass, a plastic cup of hibiscus juice my aunt had made, and said, "To family." 42 people drank. I was standing at the edge of the covered section with my blue folder under my arm and the medical forms binder in my bag and the slideshow drive in my pocket and my name on the list in his hand. I did not say anything. I did not correct him. I waited until the applause had finished and conversation had returned to the pavilion and my father had sat back down and someone had made a joke and the sound of 42 people being a family had reestablished itself. And then I put the blue folder in my bag next to the medical forms binder and I walked to the parking lot and I got in my car. My cousin Adiz found me there. She is 29 years old, Ngozi's age, the daughter of my Uncle Afani, and she has her father's quality of being present in a room without requiring the room to perform for her. She knocked on the passenger window at 4:19 p.m. I unlocked the door. She got in and sat with her hands in her lap and did not say anything for a moment. She did not perform concern. She did not say, "Oh my God," or "I cannot believe him," or any of the things that would have required me to manage her reaction. She looked at me the way a witness looks, plainly, steadily, with the full acknowledgement of what had just happened and the understanding that naming it was my work to do, not hers. After a moment she said, "I saw the list." I said, "I know." She said, "I'm sorry." I said, "You don't have to be." She said, "I know I don't have to be. I want to be." We sat for a few minutes. Outside the car the sounds of the reunion continued. Voices, a child's laugh, the specific sound of a gathering winding down toward its end. She said, "Are you staying for dinner?" I said, "I don't think so." She said, "Okay." She squeezed my arm once, without pressure, the way you touch someone when you want them to know you see them and you are not going to make it a production. She got out of the car. I sat there until 4:51 p.m. I want to tell you about those 19 minutes because I think they are the part that matters most. Not the pavilion, not the list, not the half second or my name on the paper in his hand. Those 19 minutes in the parking lot at Cedarwood Lake while the reunion continued without me and the late afternoon light came through the windshield at the angle that means the day is past its midpoint and heading somewhere else. I was not crying. I was not shaking. I was sitting in my car in the campground parking lot with my blue folder in my bag and my medical forms binder and my slideshow drive, and I was doing something I had not fully allowed myself to do across 7 years of building that reunion, which was to sit with the complete and undecorated truth of what I had just experienced. Not the version where it was an oversight, not the version where he had simply gotten flustered with the list and would realize later and feel terrible. The honest version. My father had stood at a pavilion at a gathering I had organized for 7 consecutive summers and read the names of the people who had made it happen, and my name had been on the list in his hand, and he had paused at it and moved on, and 42 people had raised their cups. I thought about Terrence Busby, knowing my voice before my name. I thought about the 14 hours in 2021 and the name tag table in the dark. I thought about the medical forms and the 37 returns and the laminated reference card in the first aid kit that had never been needed and that I hoped would never be needed and that I had built anyway because hope is not a structural system. I thought about 94 photographs and 3 months and my aunt's voice note saying I thought you should have this and the High Life song and my father watching the slideshow without speaking and saying this is a gift to the family while looking at the screen and not at me. I thought about what Kezia had said on the trail, make sure you know why it hasn't come up, and I thought about the answer I had given her, that I knew why, and I thought about whether that had been true, or whether it had been the thing I said to avoid the thing I knew. I had known, and I had kept driving to Cedarwood Lake every August with the blue folder and the binder and the drive, and I had kept building the thing that made me invisible by virtue of how well it worked, and I had kept waiting for the specific acknowledgement that would have required my father to see me not as the category of helpful child but as the specific person who had been showing up for 7 years with the correct permits and the laminated medical card and the slideshow assembled from photographs sourced across 2 continents. Something in me went completely quiet in that parking lot. Not the polite quietness I maintained at family dinners when something landed wrong and I absorbed it and moved on. The real kind. The kind that comes when you stop negotiating with a truth you have been managing for a long time and simply let it be what it is. The truth was this: my father loved me. I was certain of that in the plain, factual way I am certain of load calculations. It was not in question. The truth was also this: my father had never once, across 7 summers of reunion logistics, looked at what I did and understood that a specific person was doing it deliberately and at cost, and had been doing it for reasons that went beyond the love of a daughter for her family. He had received it as ambient. He had received it the way you receive the structural integrity of a bridge, without thinking about the engineer. My father is a structural engineer. He knows better than most people that bridges do not build themselves. He had simply never applied that knowledge to me. I put the car in drive at 4:51 p.m. I did not go back to the pavilion. I drove to the motel I had booked 12 miles from the campground. I had stopped staying at the rental house 3 years earlier when I understood that leaving at the end of the reunion required me to orchestrate my own exit around other people's comfort, and I had made the unilateral decision to have a place that was simply mine. And I arrived at 5:09 p.m. and checked in, and went to my room and sat on the edge of the bed in the particular quiet of a motel room on a Saturday evening when the day outside is still going and you have removed yourself from it. I called Kezia at 5:23 p.m. She picked up on the second ring. I said, he read every name on the list. He paused at mine and kept going. She was quiet for 1 beat. Then she said, I'm sorry. I said, I'm okay. Actually, okay. She said, do you need to talk it through or do you need to just say it and have someone know? I said, the second one. She said, okay. I know. I'm here. We stayed on the phone for 11 minutes without talking very much. I looked at the ceiling of the motel room and let the day settle through me without trying to resolve it or reframe it or build something useful out of it. Just let it be what it was. When we hung up, she said, "Drive safe tomorrow." I said, "I will." My father called on the fourth day. I know it was the fourth day because I had not looked at my phone with any expectation of hearing from him on the first or the second or the third, and because on the fourth day, a Wednesday, at 6:47 in the evening, his name appeared on my screen while I was at my kitchen table reviewing a load distribution analysis for a parking structure in Buckhead that I had been working on for 6 weeks. I let it ring. I was not ready. I was not performing unavailability. I was genuinely not ready, in the specific sense that I did not yet have the words for what I needed to say in a way that would be honest without being cruel, that would name the thing without making it a weapon. He left a voicemail. He said, "Simone, your aunt says you left early Sunday. Just checking on you. Call me back when you get a chance." I listened to it twice. He had not realized I had left. He required my aunt to tell him. He said, "when you get a chance," which is the phrasing of a man who is not worried, who is performing the due diligence of parental concern without the underlying urgency of someone who has registered that something happened. I set the phone face down and went back to the load distribution analysis and worked for another hour and a half, and then made dinner and ate it at my own table in my own apartment, which is on the 14th floor of a building in Midtown Atlanta with a view of the skyline that I chose specifically, and that is entirely mine. I did not call back that day. I did not call back the next. I went to work and I did the work I am genuinely good at, and I ran the trail with Kezia on Saturday morning and I told her about the voicemail and she said, "What are you going to do?" I said, "I'm going to call him when I know what I want to say." She said, "Good." We ran for another mile without talking. The trail was the specific green of late summer, the color that means everything is at its fullest before it begins to change. I texted my father 9 days after the reunion. I kept it short. I said I was fine, that I had needed some time, that I wanted to have a real conversation when I was ready, and that I would reach out to schedule a call. I did not explain. I did not apologize. I did not add the softening qualifiers I would have added 3 years ago, the "I know you didn't mean anything by it," and the "I'm probably being too sensitive," and the "all the work was worth it just to see everyone together," the sentences I had written and not sent, and sometimes sent anyway across 7 years of driving home from Cedarwood Lake with the empty blue folder in the back seat. I sent what I sent, put my phone in my jacket pocket, and walked to the coffee shop on the corner and ordered the same thing I always order, and sat in the window and read for an hour. My brother Junior texted in September. He said, "Hey, are you doing the reunion next year? Dad mentioned you might be stepping back." I read that text and sat with it for a moment. Dad mentioned you might be stepping back. My father had processed my absence, not as a response to something that had happened, but as a logistical development that required forward planning. He had mentioned it to Junior. Junior was texting me to confirm the operational status of the reunion infrastructure. This was, I understood, the honest shape of how my labor had been received across 7 years, not as a gift, which requires a giver, but as a service, which requires only a provider. I wrote back, "I'm not organizing it next year. If the family wants to continue it, someone will need to take it on. Terrence Busby at Cedarwood Lake is the contact. He knows our preferences, and he's easy to work with. I'll send you his number." Junior replied, "Oh, okay. Do you have the campground info?" I sent him Terrence's number and the pavilion booking reference number I had used for 6 years. I put the phone face down on my desk and went back to the parking structure analysis, which was due on Friday, and which I was going to deliver correctly and on time, because that is what I do. I still see my therapist, Dr. Renata Osebonsu, who I have been seeing every other week for 2 years, and who has the particular quality of asking questions that feel simple and are not. In our September session, she asked me how it felt to have sent the text to Junior. I said it felt like handing something back that I had been carrying so long the shape of it had become part of my posture. She said, "What do you think you were trying to build with the reunion?" I thought about that for a long time. I thought about my grandmother calling from the kitchen at family gatherings, the specific authority of her voice, the way things happened, because she said they would. I thought about being 25 and calling my father and saying I want to try to organize the reunion, and my father saying it would mean everything to this family. I said, I think I was trying to become the person who held the family together the way she did. I think I thought that if I built what she built, I would be seen the way she was seen. Dr. Osebansu said. And I said, she was seen because she was her, not because of the pepper soup. She wrote something in her notebook. I looked out her office window at the midtown skyline, the specific buildings I can identify by their structural systems, the ones I have studied and the ones I have worked on, and I felt, sitting in that chair, that I understood something about foundations I had not fully understood before. A foundation is not the same as a building. You can pour the most precise foundation in the world and still have no claim on what rises from it. The claim comes from something else, from being named in the structure, from having your contribution visible in the load path, from being the engineer of record, and not just the one who graded the site. I called my father in October on a Sunday morning at 10:09 after I had finished my coffee and reviewed the site assessment for the parking structure, and felt, for the first time since August, like I had something to say from a place of steadiness rather than injury. He answered on the first ring, which told me he had been expecting the call, which told me someone had told him something, which told me the family had been having conversations about me that I was not part of, which is its own kind of information. We talked for 44 minutes. He told me he had not realized he had skipped my name. He told me he had been nervous with so many people watching. He told me he had looked at the list afterward and seen my name and felt terrible. He said, Simone, everything you do for this family, I don't know how to. I said, Dad, I need you to hear me. He was quiet. I said, for 7 years, I organized that reunion. 7 years of the campground reservation and the name tags and the medical forms and the slideshow and the 14 hours in the car in 2021 when my flight was canceled. And you stood at the pavilion and read every name on a list that existed because of me, and you paused at mine and kept going. I'm not telling you it was deliberate. I'm telling you it happened. And I'm telling you it happened because you have never seen me doing the work the way you would see it if Junior or Ngozi had done it. You see me the way you see the pavilion. You're glad it's there, and you don't think about why.
He was quiet for a long time.
He said, that's not fair. I said, which part? He did not answer. I said, I'm not calling to punish you. I'm calling because I have been invisible to you in a specific way for a long time, and I need you to know that I know it, and that I'm not going to keep building things that make me more invisible. He said after a pause, I didn't realize. I said, I know. That is exactly what I have been sitting with. We ended the call, without resolution. I had expected that. My father is a man who processes things slowly and privately and arrives at conclusions on his own timeline, which is a quality I inherited from him and which I understand better now than I did at 25. He may come back to this differently. He may not. I have stopped building the prediction into my plans. What I can tell you is what I did the following Saturday. I drove to the farmer's market in Decatur, where there is a vendor who sells a specific variety of late-season tomato that I have been roasting on Sunday mornings for 3 years, and I bought 2 pounds, and I drove home and roasted them with olive oil and thyme and ate them on toast at my own kitchen table with the midtown skyline in the window, and the morning being entirely, completely mine. I thought about Cedarwood Lake and the pavilion permit and Terrence Busby's voice on the phone every January. I thought about the 94 photographs and the High Life song and my grandfather as a young man in Lagos. I thought about Adiz in the passenger seat of my car at 4:19 p.m., her hands in her lap, saying I want to be sorry because I want to be, not because I have to be. I thought about what it means to be seen by one person plainly and accurately, and without performance in a moment when the 42 people around you have raised their cups to a gathering you built and drunk to everything except your name. Showing up is not the same as being counted. Building the room does not mean you are welcome in it. I can love my family from a distance that protects me. I did not organize the reunion that year. I went to work and I designed things that have to hold, and I called Kezia on Saturdays and I drove past the skyline I can name structure by structure, and I watched it hold its shape without explanation, without a name tag, without a list. That was enough. It was more than enough. If you have ever stood in something you built and waited for someone to say your name inside it, how long did you wait? And what would it mean to finally build something only for yourself?